Listen to this from today's reading. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. For if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile." There are a lot of clever interpretations out there which persuade us, or try to persuade us, that Jesus is not really saying what he appears to be saying here. But what is here fits in very well with the radical thrust of Jesus' teaching elsewhere. Jesus' teaching is as difficult and as radical as it sounds and as it seems. I want us to watch this video. One of the co-founders of the Peace People in Northern Ireland speaking here, and hear it in the light of Jesus' statement. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer.
On the 10th of August 1976, one of my youngest sisters, Anne, went walking with 4 of her children, and there was a clash between an active service unit of the Irish Republican Army and the British Army, and the British Army shot the IRA man driving a car through the head, and his car went up onto a footpath, and it pinned my sister Anne and 3 of her 4 children against school railings, and all the children were killed. And Andrew was only 6 weeks old, John was 2.5, and Joanne was only 8. And the young IRA man, Danny Lennon, was also dead. So my sister was dangerously ill at that time and not expected to live. So some of us got together and we said, this has got to stop. We've got to solve our problems another way, because violence doesn't work. And myself and Betty Williams, whom I met the day the 3 children were buried, and Kieran McKeown, a young journalist at the time, 3 of us joined together to start what became known as the Peace People. And it was a grassroots, spontaneous movement saying, we have got to use different ways to solve our problems. That was the beginning of Peace People.
The pain of bereavement is as bad as anything in life gets, and there is nothing we wouldn't do for those whom we love, and there is no anger like the anger we feel when someone hurts one of our family. And Northern Ireland's politics is an awful lot more complex than Protestant versus Catholic, but at the heart of it all, at the heart of all conflict, is fear and misguided self-interest. The peace movement began with and begins anew all of the time, when people say that they will not return hurt and violence with more hurt and more violence. Forgiveness makes sense. It is almost impossibly difficult, but it is the only option which makes any kind of sense in a situation which is a complete impasse. Something someone said to me about the meditation group, or in the meditation group, really made me think the other week. This person reminded us that progress on the spiritual path is not always to be measured in terms of how good we feel, or the level of our peace. And Jesus is not in today's reading suggesting that what he's teaching will make us feel better. In the short term, we are inevitably, if we follow what he's doing, denying ourselves the self-indulgence of anger and hatred. And Jesus isn't suggesting that the other person has to be ready to enter into some sort of contract. Too often you hear so-called Christians saying that someone has to want or deserve forgiveness. But if you deserve forgiveness, then there's nothing left to do. There's no need for any more action. Jesus is quite specific here. Let's dig in to another part of today's reading. You have heard that it was said, "You shall love your neighbour and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Let's take a look at this short video in which Desmond Tutu addresses the whole question of forgiveness.
If you are going to wait for the perpetrator to be ready to ask for forgiveness, to be penitent, you are binding yourself into a victimhood. You're saying, I depend on him. Whereas you can say, I am ready to forgive you, and I forgive you. And then it is like a gift. It is up to him or her to accept the gift. But you are then released from the victimhood, and you can get on with your life. But it isn't easy. It isn't also feeling good. You know, it's a decision that you have to make.
If there is a statement which connects everything at which we've been looking in Matthew's Gospel, then it is Jesus' unequivocal statement that everyone is actually one. And here in Matthew 5, he's recorded as having said, "For he, God, makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and on the unrighteous." And in the context of love for enemies and forgiveness, what Jesus is saying is that God is indiscriminate in what he gives to everyone. All that is needed for life, warmth, water, food. And for those who can see it, what Jesus is saying here is very simply that we are to recognize that Jesus is calling us to behave in this way and to love and to forgive, not because it is a nice thing to do, but because this is how God is. Jesus' whole teaching is a reflection of how God is. As God loves, so are you to love. As God gives, so are you to give. And as God forgives, accepts and is, so are you to forgive, accept and be. This final video clip concludes what is not so much a sermon as a meditation, a reflection, a response on and to what Jesus is saying in this part of Matthew 5. I hope that Matthew's words, Jesus' teaching, and the real-life people who have had to forgive and to know the power of forgiveness will leave us open to rethinking our day-to-day lives and attitudes, and perhaps even committed to dealing with areas in which we do need to learn how to forgive and how to find a new and a different way forward.
The best way to begin to talk about forgiveness is not to tell folks to forgive their enemies. That's hard as the beginning point.
We can all be tolerant for a while until something really pushes our buttons, and then we get triggered back into a deeper memory. But forgiveness allows us to actually let go of the pain in the memory. And if we let go of the pain in the memory, we can have the memory, but it doesn't control us. And I think it's the fact that when memory controls us, we are then the puppets of the past.
Northern Ireland. It's a country where the rugged beauty of the land and the memory of long-standing conflict between Catholics and Protestants too often collide. Here, both sides have known suffering and hurt, and the memory of that hurt passes from generation to generation.
After the North Tower collapsed, I realized that there was to be no surviving that event.
just collapsed. I just sat on the floor and sobbed.
These offenses can never be adequately atoned, even if we stayed up all night saying, I hate him, 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 and then get another group to pick up where you left off. It is not possible to achieve by vigilance in anger and revenge what the soul is longing for. The soul wishes peace.
I think that that's what we are called upon to do at a time when we see so much evil, to have the moral grandeur and spiritual audacity to believe in good, to proclaim it, to stand in conviction.